Christopher Luxon on breakfast this morning was an absolute nightmare. Like, this is the worst of the worst. You may not be able to see it as clear. In fact, can I put this on 1080? Make sure it is. Oh God, it's only on 480. Let's put it up on, well, let's go 720. It's good because he's sweaty and he's stammering and he goes to those tried and true. Well, what I'm saying to you is, which is like his when he's a little bit flummoxed. When a question gets asked of Christopher Luxon that he doesn't like or doesn't know, he stammers, right? That's one of his tells. The first part of this conversation, we're talking about the cost of living crisis and what National is doing about it. The second part of the conversation, we're going to talk about Mark Mitchell and this bullshit line they're trying to say that Mark Mitchell misspoke when he went into explicit details as to why he was saying what he was saying. It wasn't a misspeak because he explained why he was saying what he got wrong. So they're trying to cover that up at the moment. And it's also really interesting, the Mark Mitchell conversation, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, that yesterday we talked about how Seymour and Luxon are in disagreement about stuff. And today it's Mitchell and Luxon are in disagreement about policy, although Mitchell seems to be pulled into line and is trying to say, no, I just misspoke. I always meant this. I always knew this. So we'll get to that. So this morning on breakfast, they were talking about the cost of living crisis. The first question is going to be pretty simple. They're looking at how National has started to tackle or is tackling the cost of living crisis. What have you actually done?
I'm curious to know, what can you point to as a specific act the government has done or has underway that will tackle the cost of living?
Well, Happy New Year, and I hope you had a good break too. But look, we're right into it. And, even before Christmas, there were three things that we've started to action immediately. The first is that we've got our Reserve Bank focused 100% on fighting inflation. We've passed laws in Parliament to keep them focused on that. Why? Because exactly as you identified, Kiwis are doing it so tough at the moment. And we've got to get inflation down so we can get interest rates down so we can grow the economy. And so we're single-mindedly focused on lowering inflation. So one, we've got the Reserve Bank Act that's been changed so that they're 100% focused on fighting inflation. Secondly, we're going through public sector savings at the moment, making sure that every taxpayer dollar that the taxpayer pays the government is actually used the most efficient way possible. Why are we doing that? Because actually that government spending has been leading to domestic inflation, which is the major cause of our inflation problems.
Now, we got to remember these words, right? And this is our responsibility too, but it's yours as well. Every dollar, because you know how sometimes guys, well, it's a department, it's only $50,000, it's only this, but National's setting themselves a yardstick. Remember, we will critique National based on what their expectations of Labor were and the expectations they put on themselves. Luxon's expectation is they have to be frightfully careful with every dollar. How much did they spend at that 5-star hotel doing negotiations? Those dollars were okay. They were different. They weren't government then, maybe, Chewy. So maybe that was the difference. But remember, every dollar is what they're worried about. Every dollar.
I mean, I don't believe that coming from a man that got a limo to go across the road when he first came into him. Start as you mean to go on.
Yeah.
And I think he...
Yeah. Yep. And obviously the thing he's not going to talk about now is the cuts to the back rooms.
Rid of red tape, because we actually want to lower the costs so that actually those costs aren't passed on from businesses into higher prices. So, there's three things that we did in our first 2 weeks before we closed for Christmas, and we're going to continue to drive into making sure we can lower inflation. Good to see some improvements. You would have seen last week that inflation came down to, I think, 4.7%. That's still a long way away from our target of being under 3%, and that's what we've got to keep driving towards.
Now, just remember, maybe he wasn't quite as explicit as this, but if they're going to claim the good news of the inflation being lower, then they must own any of the bad news that's around at the minute. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim and own the inflation coming down while still blame the government before you for the negative things going on. You either give them credit and blame them, or you give yourself credit and blame yourself. You can't have it both ways. Chewy, next part of the conversation.
That's not in the playbook.
No, next part of the conversation, which was interesting. And we just heard what he said, and they were all kind of long-term things. Now, you need to listen to his answer super carefully. I'm going to synopsize his answer once he's done, right? But super carefully, because she asks him, Anna Burns-Francis asks him very, very clearly, these are all long-term goals to make the cost of it. When will we start to see it? When will we see something tangible from all your efforts? So the answer we're looking for is a time frame. See if you can find a time frame of any sort in this answer whatsoever.
And so maybe if we don't see the result of that in the first 100 days, when do you peg that we will see it? When will we see the impact of these actions?
Well, it's a combination of making sure we make a series of actions and stay 100% focused that everything we're doing is designed to lower the cost of living for Kiwis. You're starting to see us be very focused on that. We've only been in government essentially for 2 months.
Hang on, no, only 2 months. You can't claim only 2 months if you're taking if you're taking credit for the inflation. You can't then go, well, we can't do it. I mean, you can't have it both ways.
We've already taken a series of actions before Christmas. We're going to continue to drive and take actions each and every week. You would have seen today, for example, we're actually disbanding the Productivity Commission so we can create a Ministry of Regulation designed to go after that red tape challenge that every sector is experiencing.
So they're getting rid of a bureaucracy to start up a new
to make
bureaucracy.
A new one.
Yeah.
Oh, new exciting bureaucracy.
There are rules and red tape and guidelines from government and regulations that actually don't add any value. They just add cost to farmers or to small businesses that end up reflecting in higher prices. So
what are your examples?
That's how we actually solve these problems so that actually we deal with them properly and get to the root cause of what's actually causing our problems for New Zealanders.
Okay. Now, I don't know you, Chewy, heard any dates in there at all? Because remember the question was, when are we going to see it? So what I've done is I've actually re-scripted, paraphrased what he said. This was his answer. So Chewy, you be Anna Burns Francis and ask me when we're going to see an impact from the what they're doing. Go on, let me hear it.
Mr. Luxon, when do you expect that the people will see an impact from these things that you're discussing?
The answer was, it's a combination of actions. It's a series of actions. It's everything we're doing is to lower the cost of living. Watch us. We've only been in 2 months. We did a series of actions before Christmas. We continue to do things. We're disbanding a bureaucracy to add a new bureaucracy. And we talk about the cost of red tape. That's what he said. And then he ended it with this absolute statement, this one here.
That's how we actually solve these problems so that actually we deal with them properly and get to the root cause of what's actually causing our problems for New Zealanders.
So that's how we solve it. That's how we solve it, with that word salad. So Chewy, any thoughts about our fearless leader?
Thoughts, Pat. I don't think Mr. Luxon understands how inflation in an import-export country like New Zealand works. He didn't know how it worked in the run-up to the election, and nothing has changed over Christmas. He seems to think that our government has an almost instant tap to change inflation. And that's mad. Like, that's high school level economics that he does not understand.
Or he does understand it and he's playing us all for fools. We always got to put out there. They might be completely clear on what it is, and they might go, if I throw enough words out there and I start talking about just watch us, we've only been here for 2 months, we've had a series of actions, we continue to do things, everything we're doing is to lower the cost of living, we've had a series of actions and it's a combination of actions. Maybe if I can speak for long enough, they won't go back to the question. And you know what? The one criticism of Anna Burns Francis, and I'm enjoying watching her interview style, she never went back to it. She didn't go, that was all well and good, Mr. Luxon, but the question was, when are we going to see a result of all the work you're doing? When is a tangible amount going to go into our back pockets? You know,
I think maybe an opportunity for these shows to bring in a new feature. Like we're used to like the presenter presenting questions to their guest. And maybe they need to get someone else off camera. And look, I'm not saying that I'm the best person for that, but I am available to be off camera and just shout things. Like, what the fuck does that mean? Is this a statement from the Ministry of Vibes?
I would love that on TVNZ Breakfast. Just heard in the background.
We need
what
this.
The fuck does that mean?
Like,
that is brilliant.
Like, this was a criticism of ours for Luxon pre-election, that he just takes that corporate Scrabble bag and just throws it into a ceiling fan and just sees what But there's so much words and absolutely no substance. He talks about, like, this country is drowning in red tape. That's just choking the life out of business and farmers. We're usually at the top of the ratings for the ease of doing business.
Yeah.
He's talking about all of these regulations that there are. So surely it must be piss easy for him to just pull out a couple of examples of just nonsense regulations from government. But he never takes that opportunity. It is just the vibe that that's what Labor did. And my guess is a lot of these regulations are keep your fucking cows out of the stream.
Yeah.
Don't carpet bomb Roundup.
Yeah.
You know, all of these sort of things. But again, there's no clarity, there's no timeline, there's no specificity. It is just bluff.
I want to put up Simon's message here because I'll tell you what I think it is, Simon. Simon says, if you're in the audio podcast, the problem for journalists there is that the journalist's afraid of losing the interviewee. I don't think that's the case. I don't think Luxon's even not going to go on TV. No, I don't think that's the case. I think it's time. This is, look, I never did it full time, but I technical produced Paul Holmes's radio show, his breakfast radio show, maybe 30, 40, 50 times. I was the fill-in guy, right? And I've seen it. And it's not quite the same in TV, but I've seen it coming out the back of the 8 a.m. news. They have 7 minutes of ads. They have 2 minutes of weather. They have an ad break. It's 8:11. The next ad break is 8:16. The next ad break is 8:24, and he finishes at 8:26. Yeah. What I've seen, and I didn't do this. I saw his actual technical producer do this. I've seen them in a pre-recorded interview, and I'm not ragging on Paul Holmes. I'm just talking about this is what the mainstream media does when they don't have enough time. They've been in a pre-recorded interview. So Paul Holmes is talking to Chewy McChew a lot, and he goes, thank you for joining us, Chewy McChew a lot. And then you hit play. And then Chewy's first response is, pleasure to be here. And then it's a pre-recorded conversation. And so it sounds live. And then I've actually seen them get bored halfway through the pre-recorded conversation, and the technical producer put his finger on the fader and look at Paul Holmes and go like this and point and pull the fader down, and Paul Holmes coming out the back of a question because they couldn't be asked during the last question. That's the mentality of time frames around interviews in the mainstream media, because they have to get to the next ad break, and if they don't get paid. So I actually think the reason for not going, no, hang on, you didn't answer the question. No, it's because there was 2 more questions to come and they only have them for a certain amount of time. That's what I think it is.